Electricast.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
I don't think you should be necessarily designing for kids. I think you should be designing to be family friendly. They brought in an outside researcher and they handed me a list and they're like, this is the list of vocabulary words from a second grader spelling test. You should only write quests using these words. It's like, I don't think you're giving kids enough credit for this.
Hi, welcome to Brain Arcade. I'm Chris Cross, and today's guest is Natalie Odien.
Yes.
Okay, I always forget. I know I asked you once about how to pronounce your last name correctly, and then I think over the years I always forget because I just started calling you Nat. So Natalie and I worked at GenVid together, and we worked on Silent Hill Ascension. Wait, you did do some work with me on Walking Dead Last Mile,
Walking
right?
Dead, yeah.
For those that don't know, go look up GenVid. It's basically interactive television. We'll go for that. And then their most recent product, which Natalie is still on, is DC Universe?
Heroes United.
Heroes United. DC Heroes United. So Natalie, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? And then just, I have a burning question to talk to you about.
Sure. So I am currently the design director at GenVid, where we most recently shipped DC Heroes United. My background is actually started as a writer and narrative designer at Nickelodeon Games, where I worked on Neopets, Pet Park, which was a MMO spinoff of Neopets, and then also Monkey Quest, which was a brand new original IP MMO that Nickelodeon was trying to do. This was the heyday of everyone trying to get into the kids' virtual worlds game. So they were trying to compete with like Club Penguin, all of those. And then that led me to Age of Learning, where I got to be one of the original designers on their brand new MMO Adventure Academy.
So how long did you spend in the kids space? It's a very specific space.
It is a long time, at least 15 years. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Because today, I used to say when I was going to try to create a major for myself when I was considering dropping out of school, one of the things that I thought would be important would be child psychology, right? And because, not because I wanted to make games aimed at younger gamers, but basically there is an appeal in all games to our inner child. And understanding that psychology, I think, is super important. But I guess here's my question. And this is just from my experience. It's really wild. Oh, by the way, I worked on 2 kids games as well. So I worked on a game called Chaos Island, which was an RTS in the Jurassic Park universe for kids. And then I worked on Small Soldiers, which was also basically a licensed product for kids. And so do you know why? I worked at DreamWorks Interactive. The early starts of DreamWorks Interactive was basically, we were kind of making games for Steven Spielberg's kids. but they weren't necessarily our identified customer, but they were definitely in the customer set of who to consider. It's not like they did come in every once in a while to check stuff out, but it wasn't like we were exclusively making games for his kids. But there was a lot of influence from you design from experience, right? And where was his experience at the time? That all eventually led to Medal of Honor, but actually
a big jump.
Well, kind of. So Small Soldiers Squad Commander was actually my first game design credit. So it was basically an interesting thing. One of the interesting things, though, for me, and then this will lead into what I want to ask you about, is that I really didn't change my design too much. It was a little bit more about not building a certain amount of depth layer, or, I mean, clearly you weren't aimed at adults, so language was different. The complexity of puzzles was different.
Yes.
Also, the way that I felt like I had to communicate with the player, I wouldn't say that it was simpler. It was just nuanced in a more like age appropriate way. And I wanted to try and hit that Looney Tunes like perfect spot of like, well, there is some depth here for adults playing with their kids, because I was considering the 2-chair thing. But, you know, the challenge was making sure that it actually didn't overshoot the mark a little bit, right? That it was always aimed at like a single digit age, right? Or like at most 12 years old. So my question for you, and that's the little bit of experience I want you to jump off of for me, is you worked on Neopets. So I did, you know, I'll talk a little bit about, there was some HD attempts, HD remake attempts over the last few years. But it's interesting that everybody I ever talked to about Neopets, if they were a fan, they are still a fan. Like as adults, it is one of those things that you were either a Neopets player or you weren't, right? And if you were, you're a hardcore fan. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Why do you think Neopets has lasted so long in people's memories?
So I think there's several factors that go into this. I think one, it was at the forefront of that virtual world age. Before all those other ones like Club Penguin came into the picture, this was like really the first one in the brand new days of the internet, right? Late 90s. And I think this is an important design principle that I hold by. Like, I don't think you should be necessarily designing for kids. I think you should be designing to be family friendly.
Oh, let's dig into that a little bit. So when you say family friendly, so you're essentially saying that you don't design for one person in the family. You're trying to design it for anybody in the family.
Yeah. So, you know, I can say as a parent, there are kid shows that I actually enjoy watching with them. And then there are ones that make me want to claw my eyes out, you know.
Sure.
And that's the distinction I think we're looking for. You know, we've sometimes gotten like, okay, so one time on Pet Park, they brought in an outside researcher and they handed me a list, and they're like, this is the list of vocabulary words from a second grader spelling test. You should only write quests using these words. And I was like, I don't think you're giving kids enough credit for this. You know, like, yes, obviously there is definitely a trick to writing for them. You have to, you know, simplify your language. But you also shouldn't talk down to them. And I think that's the differential. You should speak to them on terms that they understand, but you shouldn't act like they're much younger than you, because then you come off with a kind of condescending tone, I think, when you try to write with that in mind. So honestly, I ignored that advice. I did not use the vocabulary list.
Good for you.
Yeah. I wrote what I felt was good dialogue that both an adult could enjoy and that a kid would also enjoy. It's often said by like defenders of Neopets now, when people are like, oh, it's a kid's game, they'll be like, actually, the founders made this for bored college students. That was the original intent. But
that's interesting.
Yeah. So they didn't actually aim it for kids, but because it was very family friendly, it had that cute cartoonish pets look and it had the cute cartoony worlds to it, that it caught on with children as well, you know. And I think it just had so much to do that it taught children about the internet. Like, I've been told by more than one person, hey, Neopets taught me how to code when I was a kid.
Oh, wow. That's super wild, because like when you play it, even as like when I go back to check it out, it feels like a kid's product, but you're right. It doesn't feel like it's training wheels. It feels more like it's just about the content and the context.
Yes.
So I want to back up to something you said a little bit earlier about family friendly, and that's super wild. I need to go back and play some old. I'll have to find a Flash player, but well, bored college kids are arguably like pretty childlike as well. Anyway, yes. as far as the entertainment level, so the talking down thing. So like I have that rule as well, just in my personal life of like, you know what, I never talk in falsetto. Like,
Yes.
it's basically puppies, babies, and children. I always talk to them as if they're by tone adults, but by sentence structure is simplified, right? And so
Yes.
I feel like you can't learn more vocabulary, complex sentence structures, etc., if you don't get exposure. So if we just spend our whole time doing like see spot, run, spot, catch ball, spot, right, like you would end up with like nobody's going to get any smarter from that. And so like learning how to learn is interesting. Would you say that Neopets had some of that built in, the like, I'm curious, I should go learn about this thing and then come back to it, essentially off-screen experience?
Yeah. So going back to the coding thing, right? Like people said Neopets taught me how to code. And it's not that we actually had any sort of games that taught you how to code. What we did was we had a page that you could customize yourself, your own pet page on Neopets that you could mess around with HTML5 yourself and do whatever you wanted with it. And just by the nature of having that, these kids taught themselves how to code because they wanted to make the coolest page imaginable. And, and just having avenues to display that, like we would show off spotlights on really cool looking pages. So just having the building blocks for them.
Oh, you actually had spotlights on cool pages too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that like 100x is the reward, right? Yeah. Because like there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I want to call out, which is like there's a social reward to doing this. And this is before we even had like social media currencies and credits and that type of thing. Is basically off the screen or even in the world, you had this social component, and like the big reward for learning how to code was like social clout, right? That's one of the most powerful rewards, period. Just being accepted and or celebrated by your peer group. And so that's interesting because like anytime, like I have a hard time doing like online lesson plans for stuff. I'm like, this is crazy. Like I don't want to do this. Give me like, what's the goal I'm going for and how do I get there? And I think that comes into the way I like to design as well, where it's more like about the rewards structure than it is about the like organization of lesson plan. So when we think about that though, would you say that Neopets has impacted the rest of your design career? Like in other words, like because you started there or not started there, but because it was earlier in your career, well, how much has that affected, the rest of your career?
Yeah, I think because we had that environment on Neopets where it was like, no, you don't need to talk down to kids. You're just writing for everyday users. That I think just carried through to the rest of my work where I'm like, look at this. I worked on this highly successful product with kids that kids really love and attach themselves to. And we in no way dumbed it down for them, right? We had what we called site plots that were like community puzzles. We didn't try to dumb those down. Some of them were pretty hard.
Okay.
And they loved it. Those were like the most popular thing, I think, was the site plots. Like people really engaged with them.
You say so it was a community-based goal? Like a lot of people had to try and finish it. Was there a time limit? Explain to me what they are a little bit more in detail. So give me the one pager.
They would be various different kind of puzzles, and we would want enough of the community to solve it to move on to the next step of the story.
Okay. And so it was basically like some time limit, like a week or 2 weeks or something like that. And then basically the reward was you unlocked some new section or new thing.
Yeah, and then at the end of the story, everyone got like a bunch of
Everybody
cool
got something.
rewards.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let's go back to the like original story that I told about Neopets, which is like, why do you think everything that we just talked about makes people still fans to this day? Like, what is it about that impact? Like, from your POV, why does a 35-year-old person still go, I love Neopets? Like, it was amazing. I love, like, you know, and they have such a strong emotional reaction. It's way, I have to say, it's one of the, if I were to put emotional nostalgia on a scale, Neopets is probably like in the top 3, right? I would like, generally, like, it crosses all demographics. It crosses, like, it's just like people of a certain age that remember Neopets have a very high emotional fan content as far as like the way they felt about that about Neopets in general. So like, what, like, dig into that a little bit. Why do you think that is? Like, what did you do, Natalie? What did you do?
Well, I can't take credit for starting it, but
Sure.
I think a lot of it is, you know, there's definitely a correlation with nostalgia and how much time investment you put into something. Like the more you spent on it as a child, the more you're remembering it with fond memories later as an adult. And Neopets just had a plethora of things to do. You know, I can barely list them all because it's so long ago, but you could enter the storytelling contest. You could enter the poetry contest. You could enter the site contest. There was a way to go through the message boards and search for a super special hidden avatar that you can only get in a certain combination of clicks of the pages. There was a lot of exploration, especially for something that was like, you know, browser based, right? This was a virtual world where there's so much to do and see. And then, of course, you know, you mentioned it before, there's like that huge library of Flash mini games. There was the Neopian Times. You could be a reporter. And some people just spent all their time doing that. They just wrote articles for the glory of being published in the Neopian Times. That was all they wanted. You got like a special avatar that said you were a reporter for the Neopian Times. And like, I know players who just dedicated their whole time to that. So I would say like almost like a precursor, right, to an MMO, which are notorious time sinks. There was just so much to do and a vibrant community to engage with that just people ended up spending a lot of time on it and just remember that time.
You know, that's super interesting because, like, you know, it's so much different now. But back in the day, when thinking about how to design an MMO, it was really, you know, when you design like a third person action game, you design a character that people want to be, right? That was sort of the way you thought about it. And then like first person was like, who do you want to be, or what's the fantasy we're fulfilling? And I think it's interesting that Neopets is very early in the, it's less about who you wanted to be, because I kind of feel like everybody came as themselves, but it was more like you created a place for people to hang out, right? And like we use the word retention now, but it was a little less about retention and a little bit more about like having like a fun space, right? Because like when I look at Neopets, and this is just me, I was too old for it. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh, this is cute. It's great. I didn't want to hang out there because I wasn't of that age, right? Like I had other things I wanted to do. I wanted to hang out in like Asheron's Call or like, you know, like eventually World of Warcraft, right? And so that's where I was. But like there's something about the alchemy of what you guys built that was perfect for hanging out at that age. So how did you make it a safe space? Because as I remember, it wasn't that dangerous for people, right. But was it, I mean, I think part of that is a little bit the limitations of interaction, right? But it sounds like there was something for everybody. Would you say that's kind of true as far as like a bunch of different personality types?
Definitely. Yeah, I would say there was something for everybody, right? There's for exploring, there was for creative expression, there's the pet collection aspect, obviously. And there was actually a really good, thriving player economy. That was, again, some players, all they did was just buy and sell. Like they were just really into making the best Neopet store possible. And like it was the days where you just had to refresh your browser to refresh the shop. and like items would appear for like 2 seconds and be gone because it was a competitive. So someone could snatch that item out of the shop before you did. And they built, obviously they built cheats, to refresh pages and like try to grab items. So that was another thing, like just a very vibrant player economy. And I would say like there was just something for everyone, any kind of player to do.
That's interesting. It's like kids eBay.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Well, because back then, like you would like eBay snipe. Like there was like that last second before an auction closed, they would try to get the price they wanted.
We had an auction house and people did try to eBay snipe each other.
That's really funny. I was just thinking about like the mimicry that kids, or basically the same conditions, created a behavior that is common for adults at the time too.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Sorry, I'm a little bit topic hopping only because like the breadth of Neopets is almost hard to fit into a shorter conversation, So I want to jump back to like, I want to hear a little bit about how designing for family friendly, like what's the difference in that approach from say what you're working on now, which is DC Heroes United, right? So like there's a different spread of, I bet right now your most of your conversations are about casual versus hardcore, right? But which is a different conversation than like family friendly. And so like what were the differences in your design approach at that time?
I think understanding the kids' mentality, right? So they're more emotional. So you have to be very careful, I think, when playing with those emotions. And game design is all about psychology, right? And understanding that they have more drastic highs and lows in their emotional range, and that things are just in general shorter to them, right? So they're quicker to frustration, right? They are quicker to anger or tears or happiness even. So designing these feedback loops that are very much intentionally encouraging them to not get frustrated, right? So obviously on DC Heroes United, it's a survivor's like. The game is kill the player and let them live a little bit longer, kill them again. You know, but the goal is to, like, they have to fight through this. The odds are against them, and then they come out the other end like God. And the payoff, part of the payoff is the grind that it took them to become the God. Right. But you can't really have that kind of grind with kids or family friendly, because even as a mother, if I'm playing with my child, we're not looking to have a huge, long Dark Souls experience. We're looking for quick little bites of gameplay and entertainment. So like these short feedback loops, things like failure as a teacher, you don't want to use that too much. Like you have to understand at which point failure is too much for them, right?
Ooh, footnote. This is part of why I don't like most of the Souls games, is that failure as learning methodology is one of my pet peeves. Like it's one of my do not do's. Like failure is fine, but intentionally using it from a design standpoint to like there's a fine line here, right? Like I actually don't think the Souls games use failure as a teaching point. They're just very difficult. But in practice, it ends up being learned by failure, right? So it's like intentional learning by failure is something more like fight this boss, and then after you die, then they show you the trick. But you can only see the trick because you died, as opposed to like the way that From Software works is like, well, it's there. You just didn't learn it, right? And so there's an intentionality to it. Okay, so I agree with 100% with everything that you said. Like designing for kids is about shorter feedback loops, maybe not nuanced as much and very, very clear on the emotions that you're trying to either target or trigger or, expose for themselves or maybe even call out. I did similar things in the RTS game. Well, like an RTS genre is actually a core genre at the time, right? So in the late 90s, RTSs were was very much a core game. And so doing an RTS aimed at a younger audience was extremely challenging at times because some of the math you have to do or feel as a player in an RTS, like you have to actually call those things out for kids. And so like it's basically not about like expecting them to figure out like sub damage types or a bunch of other things. It was actually very sort of rock paper scissors simple and keeping it that way. So here I've got an interesting question. I am curious because you just said like as a parent, talk to me a little bit about that. Well, do you wish that you had a Neopets for your kids? And would it be the same?
Yeah, I don't know if it would be the same, right? I feel like there's so much like late 90s nostalgia that comes with Neopets. I mean, there's still pet games on the market, but they don't really have the same type of breadth, right? They're not virtual worlds as well, really. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I would love that for my kids. I think it taught them a lot. It would teach them a lot.
So,
right? Like how to write, how to code, how to draw. It encouraged like all those aspects of creativity.
So it's almost like, let me kind of say it a slightly different way, because I know Club Penguin has tried to reboot a few times. And like I said, I worked on an HD remake of some of the mini games from Neopets, which was extremely difficult because those are written in Flash, and like Flash doesn't have a clean conversion because of the way it was architected. Right. Like, and so that was a very, very challenging. I'm not going to get into the nuances of Flash conversion to Unity or whatever, but like, because of that, it changes the feel of the game. And to try and replicate the Neopets feel, it was like super hard. You have to write all kinds of extra code. Like it wasn't a one-to-one, just update it kind of a thing. But what I'm hearing about the parent thing is like Neopets, part of the appeal of Neopets was the breadth of activities, right? Which is not how we design for a modern world anymore, unless you're building an explicit MMO. But even MMOs really only support maybe like, 4 to 6 player types. And I think one of the things that made Neopets super magical was there was something for literally everybody, right? Yeah. Like, you're not going to jump into World of Warcraft right now and say, I want to be a journalist and write about Warsong Gulch and the things that happen there. Like that's something that was actually possible in Neopets, right? And so like that's not supported, and partially because of cost, but also like a targeting of a certain amount of players from design, because monetization is so built in. How did Neopets actually monetize back in the day?
Just ads that back in the day. Yeah. And then eventually when Nickelodeon bought them, they started getting more into paid customization, like small in-app purchases like that.
Right. Like little microtransactions. Like,
yeah.
That was, I think, early in the inception of the term microtransaction of like.
Yes. And it's not really in-app purchases because there's no app, but you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Wow. I'm just trying to think of like, there's a real opportunity here if you were, had enough money and the know-how to make a new Neopets, but it's less about being copying Neopets is a little bit more about trying to copy the breadth, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when I talk about Grand Theft Auto, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It's like it's a collection of 70s, maybe 80s, as far as the game systems go. And like, and I said this in a previous podcast where it's like driving. It's not going to beat Gran Turismo, but it's good enough, right? And like each individual system itself is not. It's competitive, but it's not best in class. But it's the breadth of systems in Grand Theft Auto that people love, and it's the social, like Grand Theft Auto Online. People get to mess with each other, but like I think there's an opportunity here for potentially doing an MMO. And by MMO, I use the term loosely because I also think that part of what made Neopets interesting is the fact that it wasn't necessarily a 3D world. It was just this window into imagination, right? Where you had lots of activities and the pets lived where they were. So there was some abstraction. You're like, oh, it's a soccer game. Like you could just watch it on the screen and play it. It was very similar to other games at the time. But the opportunity right now would be, how do we do this in a way that allows us that much breadth? And I wonder if it wouldn't be more like, we should actually do UGC, where we let people build modularly onto this world and like give the audience a mission of like, yeah, we're Neopets, but we're not Neopets. Right. Like, so like, if you want something from those old days, you'll have to build it and then allow people to come in. Would you say that's a lot more like Roblox though, right now?
Yeah, I think that's partly what like Minecraft and Roblox have captured, right? That part of the market of the creative expression aspect, right? Where kids want a place to build that their friends can see and admire, right? So it's a little bit of that, right? Being able to build and show.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like have that like sort of creative social space. I mean, you see it in like Fortnite creative as well. So I went to Minecon in 2012 or 13, right? And so I would tell you that I would say that it's very similar in the emotional effect that Neopets had. And like, I didn't make this connection before today that I was like, oh, Neopets is kind of like in the same lineage as Minecraft and Roblox in the fact that like some of the qualitative stuff going on, and there was a little bit of UGC, but the emotional space moved with, because before you and I talked today, I was thinking like, oh, there's nothing like Neopets now. And then I realized that it's basically morphed into something like Minecraft or like Roblox, right? And to some extent, Fortnite creative. Like we kind of have different like age groups represented. But I went to Minecon and it was really wild. Like I felt very strange because I was one of the oldest people there, but the average age must have been 12, 13, something like that. And some of these kids were building and hosting or renting, like, by subscription, like their own like Minecraft servers and doing Java programming to create things that were not in the normal Minecraft play space. And so they could have had like a whole, I don't know, somebody could have built a journalist's dream as far as like I'm a reporter in Minecraft. And so like, that's super interesting to me that space is now like the evolution of Neopets. So like, would it make sense to make Neopets in Roblox or something? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, would it make sense to like nest Neopets inside something else instead of like trying to replace one of those? I don't know. Now my brain is like
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Like, I wonder, like, I think you could capture some aspects of it or, focus on one aspect of it. But like, I don't know if you could ever truly recapture the entire breadth of it in something like a Roblox game.
Right. Because like everybody played Neopets.
Right,
because there was something for everybody, and so I would tend to agree. So sorry, I cut you off. You were about to say like just in a Minecraft or like,
like, I mean, you touched on it slightly earlier. Like, I think like nowadays it would be like, would anyone be willing to do that sort of investment in that wide breadth of UGC, right? Like we actually had one employee who was just entirely dedicated to the newspaper. Like that was her full-time job. Right. And like, I think you'd be hard pressed nowadays to convince someone in a game, just like, yes, just have one person whose sole job it is to run the newspaper for kids, like
right.
You wouldn't be able to pitch that, I think.
No, I don't think so. At least not at the way that funding works right now. Like not at a company that's actually spending like that.
Right.
Like you would have to, justify the ROI for that cost in some other way. Like you would have to monetize the newspaper in some way. But that was kind of the brilliance or like innocence of that time, in that there was just a newspaper for everybody, and the benefit was that there was a newspaper. Right. Right. There was no like monetization plan for it. There was no like, microtransactions built around the newspaper. Like you didn't sell ink, like virtual ink for your virtual newspaper. Like, it's super interesting. So like, I need to noodle on this. And next time you and I talk, it needs to be like, here are the questions we need to answer. Could we build a new Neopets? If so, forget about the business case for it. Basically, we would have to say like, what would the budget be? Right. Like the budget would be very large, unless we went back to like, kind of a Flash style game set, but I don't know that it would appeal to the current audience in that way. Right.
Yeah. I don't think it would.
So
I think you'd have to rebrand it, but then, like the costs associated with updating it, I think it would be significant.
Yeah. Well, but also I am really actually turned sideways a little bit. And like, this is fun. This is why I have these conversations, right? And why we're recording them is like, I honestly did not put, it makes total sense. And I'm sure some people out there are gonna be like, wow, how did you not put this in the same category? Or like seeing that the lineage of like Fortnite Creative, Roblox, Minecraft all lead back to like Club Penguin and Neopets, right? And it's like, oh, right. And I think it's mostly because I wasn't a consumer of almost all of those things in a way that I could trace those pieces back. But now I feel like there's a challenge. All right, Natalie and I are going to design the next Neopets. I don't know what it's called yet, but we're going to design it. And then we're going to figure out what the cost is. And then, we'll problem solve how to get $100 million.
I like it. I'm on board.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we're just about out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Like any nostalgic stories from Neopets or anything, any shout outs? Like who's on our new team?
Oh man. I don't even know who's on the new team now. I do know they've recently again bought themselves, I think, and rebranded to be again more for community, because I think it lost its way for a while, right? And now they're refocusing on the community, which I think is the right thing to do.
I agree. I mean, I think they have a built-in market because of how loved Neopets is. Like you essentially have a whole generation of parents now that like, if it were the right offering, it would be take my money. Right. But like, I think the approach, I'm glad they bought it back, but like, I think the previous approach was looked at from a pure game resource, like reuse kind of approach. Reuse is maybe not the right word, but like a refurbishing, right? Yeah. Like a turnaround. And so like on a spreadsheet, the things that make it interesting don't show up, right? You would be like, oh, we're not spending any money for that. Like, why? Like, I think you can intellectually acknowledge what made Neopets interesting, but then like execute in a non-emotional way. And I think it loses it, right? So, I'm really curious to see like what comes out of the Neopet space in the near future. But in the meantime, maybe we need to make Nouveau Pets, the Nouveau Pets by Chris and Natalie. Yeah. Nouveau Pets, a place for everybody to hang out.
Nouveau creatures.
Nouveau creatures. That's right. They're not actually your pets. Pets is not PC anymore. They're nouveau creatures. You got to let them be.
Yeah. Creature crossing.
Yeah, that's right. Creature Crossing. That's right. Yeah, Animal Crossing also fits into the lineage, right? So awesome. Well, you have to come back again. And I know some of the other stuff you've got going on, like I definitely want to help you with. But yeah, let's design something together and make it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for being on Brain Arcade.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Brain Arcade is a Princess Hermit production, produced by Kyrene Kim, music and mixing by Jonathan Ontiveros. The podcast is hosted by me, Chris Cross. You can find me and my other endeavors at coffeeacross.com.